जय श्री राम फ्रेंड्स, वेलकम टू भारत मार्ग। डॉक्टर आदित्यन जी हमारे साथ हैं। वेलकम 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 आदित्यन जी। आई नो you are busy with your profession as a psychiatrist and also an expert in Chinese relationship and geopolitics. Okay, we are so happy to have you here in Bharat Marg. Thank you for coming and आपका जो wisdom share करने के लिए हम बहुत बहुत धन्यवाद आपके लिए। Our friends, please make sure to watch the video, and also before going further, friends, please make sure to like the video, comment on the video, share the video as much as you can, so that we can spread the message across the world, friends. That's we can do it only with your help. And also, friends, please make sure to subscribe the channel Bharat Marg, and also press the notification bell to make sure that you get informed as we go live along with the heading, so that you can join us and ask any questions you have. Okay. And friends, now I'm so happy to say you that we send out one dharmic message every day. You can get it from by WhatsApp, just by sending a message to +1647 964 4790। इसमें WhatsApp भेजने से आप हमसे WhatsApp में जुड़ सकें और सनातन का रूट से जड़े से आप मिल सकें, यही अपना मकसद है। आप हमसे जुड़िएगा। Okay, both in WhatsApp and YouTube. And Dr. Saab, Jai Sri Ram, welcome to Bharat Marg. I'm so happy to have you, excited to have you. Yep.
Thank you very much indeed for inviting me to Bharat Marg platform. I am very pleased to be with you today.
Absolutely. Dr. Saab, you are an expert not only in medical field. Let me give the people a little bit about your brief, so you know what they are up to. Dr. Adityanjee is a psychiatrist by profession, but let me give you much more information in a broader spectrum. Dr. Adit Adityanjee is the executive medical director at NIRVANA Health and Wellness Inc. and from Ohio, and expert in Chinese politics, more specifically, and also he's a psychiatrist by profession. He is the president of Council of Strategic Affairs that deals with international relationship and geopolitics. He is also keenly interested in upholding human rights and religious freedom and is the president of the International Commission for Human Rights and Religious Freedom. लोगों को दोस्तों, मैं आपको ये बताऊंगा डॉक्टर आदित्य जी के बारे में। ये बहुत बड़ा कन्वेंशन कर रहे हैं वाशिंगटन डीसी में। ओके, जेनोसाइड, जो भी फॉरगॉटन जेनोसाइड है, जिसके बारे में बातचीत नहीं होता है, तो उसके बारे में बहुत बड़ा कन्वेंशन होता है राइट इन वाशिंगटन, द एपिसेंटर ऑफ अमेरिका। एंड गेस व्हाट फ्रेंड्स, यू आर हियर फॉर द बेस्ट। ओके, थैंक यू डॉक्टर साहब, and welcome to Bharat Marg. And हम साधारण लोग हैं, we will like to get your input to understand better. Okay, तो मैं ये पूछूंगा, ये G20 को नया आने से चाइनीज प्रेसिडेंट, उनका मकसद था कि इसका बहुत टॉकिंग पॉइंट होगा, ये नहीं आए तो अभी तो ये पूरा राउट हो जाएगा G20 का। ये नहीं आए बोल के बहुत कुछ लोग नहीं आएंगे, ऐसा सब उनका मानसिकता था। ये ऐसा लग रहा है हमें, मगर इसमें वो फेल्ड, बट द वे इट सक्सीडेड। प्लीज से मी वेदर आवर अंडरस्टैंडिंग इज राइट, व्हाट यू वुड लाइक टू से। प्लीज वेलकम अगेन।
China is a very opaque society. You never know what is happening in China. But one thing is certain, that as far as international arena is concerned, China has consistently tried to block the rise of India or importance of India in geopolitical relationships, as well as on international platforms, whether that is United Nations Security Council, whether that is Nuclear Suppliers Group. Wherever China has been, it has tried to put roadblocks. Now, this year's G20 was supposed to be held in New Delhi. This was pre-planned, but in the beginning, China did put some roadblocks. China did not want India to use the Sanskrit phrase, Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam. China did not want actually a decision to be taken on African Union to become 21st permanent member of G20. China wanted discussion, but wanted to delay the actual decision to 2024 when the summit would be held in Brazil. So China was looking at things that would have taken the shine away from India. And there are two speculations that maybe the China's President Xi Jinping didn't come to New Delhi because he wanted to actually diminish the influence of the summit. But there are other explanations. Other explanations have to do with China's domestic problems. There are a lot of economic problems going on, and there's a possible, low-level revolt brewing in China. In the recent summer's resort meeting of Chinese elders in Beidhai, it is alleged that some of the elders, especially Zheng Qinhong, reprimanded Xi Jinping for his handling of Chinese economy, China's international standing, and all. The other, rumors that are going on is that possibly Chinese President Xi Jinping suffers from mental illness. And actually, when he went to Johannesburg to attend the BRICS meeting, there was a psychiatrist going along. There's a family history in Xi Jinping's family. His grandfather died at age of 43, and it is alleged that in the village where he was residing, he used to be called, quote unquote, a lunatic. Xi Jinping's father, Xi Zhongshan, when he was under persecution, he was totally incoherent and all. And you see,
who else can talk about this subject better than you? You being a psychiatrist,
And you see that
yourself.
Xi Jinping disappears from the television screen for 2 weeks, 3 weeks, and then suddenly reappears. So there are speculations that it may have to do with domestic issues, his personal health, but also China would have tried to, put roadblocks in India's success. And that may have been one of the issues that he did not show up. But ultimately, actually, it worked in India's favor. He may have thought that, India's importance would be diminished, or he would be put on the hot seat. He would be asked very tough questions by free press in India on Chinese economy or China's aggressive actions across Taiwan Strait. But his absence led to a very successful summit, a consensus declaration, G20 declaration, which apprehensions were that they will not be. And despite Putin and Xi Jinping's absence, the summit went on very well. There was a unanimous consensus declaration, and India came with shining lights. Actually, on the sidelines, there were other, agreements, multilateral agreements that were declared and, announced. And two of them were like IMEC, India, Middle East, European Economic Corridor, as an answer to China's BRI. It was a multilateral announcement, multilateral effort. But the idea is to provide the countries an alternative to Belt and Road Initiative, which is now, floundering and is leading to debt trap for the countries that are involved. Similarly, an international biofuel allowance was announced on the sidelines of G20, not exactly part of G20, but by some countries in which India is a participant, again, without participation of China in both these announcements. So, in fact, China itself got sidelined, and all the glory went to India's. Indian soft power, Indian cultural values were projected all over the world. And in all terms, whether as economic terms, whether it is in geopolitical terms, this meeting was considered a success.
But डॉक्टर साहब, मैं ये पूछूंगा आपसे कि ये जो भारत में रहने वाले स्लीपर सेल्स हैं, ओके, जैसा let me be very straightforward with you. Okay, हर बार जब भी जी आए थे, पहले बार भी जब भारत के लिए, ये भारत में रहने के समय ही Chinese army was doing some mischief things in the border. Okay, but this time उनका स्लीपर सेल जो कांग्रेस है, ओके, जैसा राहुल गांधी है, उन्होंने लड़ा गया और उधर से बोला कि नहीं ये तो Chinese has eaten all the land, this, that, all the hangama. Did the sleeper cells also failed miserably?
I would agree. China uses conventional techniques. They use gray zone tactics. They use psychological warfare. They use legal warfare. And Chinese espionage agencies are, in fact, active all over the world. In India, of course, but also in United States. They have used Confucius institutes to subvert universities. They have overseas Chinese police stations in United States, and they have actually illegal bioweapon labs in United States that have been exposed. Similarly, in India, besides having some Chinese influence in Congress Party, there was a memorandum of understanding signed in 2008 when Sonia Gandhi and Rahul Gandhi actually visited Beijing. At that time, it was signed between Rahul Gandhi and Xi Jinping, who used to be vice president under Hu Jintao at that point in time. We still do not know what are the terms and conditions of that MOU. And at the time of any problem with China, Rahul Gandhi has been making pro-China noises or try to berate Indian army or try to berate Indian leadership. In any
Mhm.
type of conflict, if a political leader actually criticizes the national leadership and makes approving noises about the adversary, that tells you about the loyalties of that particular person. But besides the sleeper agents in Congress Party, apparently some of the journalists have been on Chinese payroll. Chinese
Mhm.
spies are arrested periodically all over India if you follow this thing. And our intelligence agencies have been doing counterintelligence. So these small sleeper cells are arrested, doing some small kind of industry or factory or some business, being incorporated, but with Chinese directors and things like that. A few years ago, there was a journalist that was arrested in New Delhi who was on Chinese payroll. So that is a perpetual threat for every country, not just India. And I'm very happy that Indian intelligence agencies have been actually following their intelligence operations, and periodically Chinese spies are arrested. But people are able to see the politics of it, domestic politics, when some of the opposition parties take pro-Chinese viewpoint. In fact, at the time of Galwan conflict, Rahul Gandhi was in Chinese embassy dining with Chinese ambassador. Similarly, there was a time when Rahul Gandhi dashed over to Nepal and was attending a marriage ceremony of a Nepalese princess, but actually he was, in a sort of disco along with Chinese ambassador to Nepal. So there are deep-seated relationships between the current heir apparent of Congress Party and Chinese Communist Party. In various interviews, he has, approvingly talked about China's Belt and Road Initiative or Chinese vision. I think that does not inspire confidence in Indian citizens and Indian intelligentsia. And this is very obvious at this point in time.
वाह ओके नाउ मैं ये आपसे पूछूंगा जैसा अफ्रीकन यूनियन को मोदी जी ने लेके आए ओके G20 में ये हुआ है चाइनीज का एब्सेंस में सी देयर सीम्स टू बी yeah negative model by China by giving trapping them in the debt trap on the one side and Modi's positive agenda of attracting with the honey and this thing like what they say uh, how do you see this how much impact it will have how will be the growing influence of Bharat in Africa, and what will happen to Chinese relationship?
So if you see G20 and inclusion of African Union, which is a union
Mhm.
of 55 countries in African continent, in the Bali meeting of G20, the then president of African Union actually came to Modi ji. At that time, Mr. Modi and Mr. Widodo, the president of Indonesia, were sitting there, and he complained about how the G7 countries were behaving. And actually, it is said that Prime Minister Modi told him that in the next year's summit that is going to be held in New Delhi, African Union will have a place. And he apparently said in Hindi, it is ये मोदी की गारंटी है. And in fact, the then president of African Union later on actually, in conversing with Mr. Jaishankar, related that I could not understand whatever was stated in Hindi, but I understood that it was Modi's guarantee. So
Hmm.
India, under the current leadership, had been working since Bali summit to get African Union included as a permanent member in G20. And India actually held no stones unturned. In January of 2023, there was a virtual meeting conducted, Global Voice of the South or something like that, in which most of the African countries participated. And Prime Minister Modi took feedback from all the countries in Global Voice of the South Summit about this. So there were background activities going on, working with G7 countries, talking with Russia, talking with China. Well, China could have put a roadblock, but finally they were prevailed apparently by all of them not to make it a prestige point of view and allow. So even before the summit concluded, African Union was made a member of G20. They have not decided whether to call it G21 or still call it G20, but the decision was taken, it was announced. So it is a milestone that in New Delhi summit, G20 summit, African Union became a permanent member of G20. It is going to give a lot of goodwill to India in Africa and in United Nations and probably in any other international fora, because this act of India, inclusive act of India, to bring African Union that has an aspiration, that is an important part of the world, has around 1 billion people, be part of this important platform and have a voice, be able to sit and articulate their own issues, I think will help India later on in future years in establishing India's leadership in various global platforms.
Dr. Sab, on this itself, I have a small question on the side. That
Right.
is, the UN has been very protective of not allowing India. Somehow भारत को अंदर नहीं छोड़ेंगे, ऐसा ही बात हो रहा था. मगर अब G20 हो या ब्रिक्स हो, they are bringing new countries inside so much, right? And giving forum, it becomes a voice for the voiceless. अभी इसका मतलब क्या है? UN will become soon irrelevant, that it doesn't make any already, if not already, will it become irrelevant soon?
UN is a creature, is a structure of post World War II geopolitical scenario. It was created by the victors of the Second World War. And of course, we are living in 2023. The situation has changed. United Nations, especially the P5 members, have refused to allow any reform of Security Council. And majority of the resistance is coming from China. China does not want, their, veto power to be curtailed, their influence to be diluted. So as the geopolitical situation is changing, new structures are being created. And some of these structures are of Chinese influence. One of them is Shanghai Cooperation Organization, SCO. Second is BRICS. These are China-led organizations. And of course, BRICS was expanded at the behest of China. But G20, including African Union, is India's effort, solely India's effort, despite some, lukewarm response by G7 countries, and definitely kind of obstructionist roadblocks by China. uh, G20 has been able to bring African Union into permanent fold. What it will lead to United Nations, either United Nations has to reform, especially the Security Council, or it will become so irrelevant that other platforms will take over the role of United Nations. Even now, for last 20 years, we have seen that United Nations Security Council is ineffectual in preventing any international conflict, whether that was an illegal war conducted by United States in Iraq for the second time, whether it is what is happening in Ukraine, any hotspots you see, whether you look at Syria, what is happening in Syria, United Nations has not been able to prevent any conflict. And in that responsibility, United Nations Security Council is sort of, paralyzed with inaction because of one veto power or the other veto power. So until and unless we have reform of United Nations Security Council to reflect the current geopolitical realities, it will become irrelevant and new
Okay,
threats create.
my last question to you, Dr. Saab, that is about the new economic corridor that has been announced, and which you touched upon it a bit. Okay, and the presence of Saudi Arabia and closeness that is being shown between भारत और सऊदी अरेबिया के बारे में बीच में जो नजदीकी दिखाया गया, और ये इकोनॉमिकल कॉरिडोर, और इसका सारे तरफ से स्वागतम हुआ, जैसा आप देख रहे हैं इसराइल का भी, नेतन्याहू भी इज वेरी हैप्पी विद दैट एंड मेनी अदर्स. जिसका और चाइना का क्या मायना है, इससे कितना उनका इन्फ्लुएंस कट होगा सऊदी अरेबिया इन द प्रिज्म ऑफ सऊदी अरेबिया?
So, recently China had brought Saudi Arabia and Iran together on one platform while they are fighting. Some of the BRI countries involved, Pakistan, the IMEC corridor does not go through Pakistan. You might have noticed that. It does not go through Afghanistan. It does not go through Iran. So it goes through the sea route and then to Saudi Arabia, etc., etc. It is a very important development because it is without China's participation. That is one thing very important, that IMEC corridor does not have China's backing, does not have China's blessing. In fact, it has been announced to take away the influence of BRI in the Middle East and have a direct corridor from India to Europe for connectivity, for trade, for other things. India has been part of North-South corridor, which Russia had started, and India had actually developed the Chabahar port in Iran, and there is a road that was built up to Afghanistan as part of that North-South corridor, and so India has some connectivity there. But this will be very important because this is going to be totally bypassing BRI and will lead to better trade, better connectivity. And the fact that Saudi Arabia and Israel both are backing this gives you guarantee for security for this corridor in future. So this,
हाँ जी, हाँ, सऊदी और भारत का नजदीकी, इसको चाइना कैसा देखेगा? He was having a fantastic time here in Bharat with the feast, everything.
I think it will be an eye opener for China and a cause for jealousy and heartburn for China, that even with a country like Saudi Arabia that is considered, a totally theocratic country, inimical to India's interests in the past. In the past, there have been problems, with Saudi Arabia backing the jihadi terrorism in Pakistan and all that sort of thing, funding jihadi forces internationally. But the current government of Saudi Arabia has shown reform, and they are trying to actually moderate the jihadi elements in that country, slowly bringing out reform domestically, and their international policies are also changing from extreme right-wing jihadi terrorism to moderation, and in that process, they are engaging with India. They are engaging with India, and I think that would be an important achievement for India, this corridor, and this would be actually a slap on the face of China.
One last word from you. Do you think G20 is a masterstroke for Modi to go into the third term?
it may not have that much of influence on the elections, because elections are not won on foreign policy issues. Elections are won, contested, fought on economic issues and domestic issues. Modi won 2014 election without G20. Modi won 2019 Lok Sabha election without G20. Elections are due in May of 2024. And we are talking here now in September of 2023. So we have to understand that anyone who's in power has to safeguard nations' geopolitical interests in international arenas. And Prime Minister Modi is doing that rightly. But I would not ascribe motive to it that this is done solely for the purpose of winning the election in 2024. In fact, the critics who are alleging that this is why Modi did it to win the election, I think they are far from reality, kind of delusional. You know, in politics, 1 week is too long a time. So what happened in September of 2020 on foreign policy achievement is not going to govern the outcome of May 2024 Lok Sabha elections. Is the domestic, welfare schemes, whether it is Ujjwala or Yojana, or toilets for all the houses, or Jan Dhan Yojana, all these kind of welfare schemes that are benefiting the economically weaker sections in India, irrespective of religion, caste, linguistic barriers. In true spirit of Sabka Saath, Sabka Vikas, Sabka Vishwas. That is going to win the election for Mr. Modi and his party in May 2024. And with the electoral projections, yes, that's going to happen. But I would not say
Absolutely.
that this G20 success or whatever was done with a view to winning the election. I would not go there.
Absolutely. Thank you, Dr. Adityanjee. Thank you for joining us and pouring your wisdom, and appreciate it very highly, taking time and talking to us in your busy schedule. Appreciate it.
It was my pleasure, and I'm happy to be on your platform. Thanks a lot for inviting me.
Jai Jai Sri Ram.
Jai Shri Ram.